My grandson pulled me aside, his wide, frightened eyes filled with dread, and whispered, "Grandpa, I learned something awful about my parents." The words hit me like a punch. My world tilted. I called 911 immediately, heart hammering in disbelief. 20 minutes later, the police arrived and took my son into custody. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting us know where you're listening from. The office door burst open. Cleveland charged in without knocking, his tailored suit rumpled from movement, papers clutched in a white-knuckled grip. The oak door slammed against the wall, rattling the windows that overlooked Lake Erie. I looked up from my quarterly reports, reading glasses sliding down my nose, taking in my son's flushed, tense face. "Dad, enough." Cleveland slammed a stack of legal papers onto my mahogany desk. Sheets flew across the surface, burying the financial projections I'd been studying. "You're too old for this. You can't manage anymore." I slowly removed my glasses, placing them on the desk with careful deliberation. 30 years of grueling negotiations had taught me the power of measured movements, but none of those deals had ever involved my own son standing before me like an opponent. "What exactly am I incapable of handling, Cleveland?" My voice stayed calm, even as anger began simmering beneath the surface. He began pacing behind the chair opposite me, fists clenched. "The company needs fresh leadership, modern ideas. You're stuck in the past while competitors race ahead with digital innovation and aggressive growth." "Fresh leadership," I repeated slowly. The words stung more than they should. I rose from my chair, full height imposing despite my 68 years. "And you think you're the one to provide it?" "I know I am," he said, halting and leaning forward, palms pressing against my desk. The family photo of his college graduation shuddered under the pressure. "I've been ready for years. You just refuse to see it because you can't let go." The late afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, casting sharp shadows on his face, hardening features I once knew as a boy's. When had my ambitious son become this relentless stranger? "Ready?" I asked, voice steady though anger roiled like a storm behind my ribs. "Yesterday you wanted massive loans for untested technology. Last month, you suggested cutting half our workforce for short-term gains. That isn't leadership, Cleveland, that's recklessness." He bristled. "That's adapting to survive. While you coddle employees like family, competitors are streamlining and maximizing profits. We could triple revenue in 2 years if you just step aside." I walked around the desk, standing directly in front of him. "And destroy everything I've built in the process." "Everything we've built," he corrected, voice rising. "I've spent 15 years here. I know this business inside and out. The only thing holding Thompson Manufacturing back is your refusal to embrace change." The accusation hung in the office air like smoke. I studied my son's face, searching for the eager teenager who once organized my tools in the garage, endlessly curious about every part of the business. That boy admired my work. This man saw me as the obstacle. "I'm not retiring, Cleveland. The company still needs a leader, one who understands the 21st century." Cleveland's fist slammed down on the desk, rattling my brass nameplate. "I'm not asking permission anymore, Dad. I'm telling you how this will happen." Silence fell over the office, broken only by the distant hum of traffic 20 floors below. A chill settled over me. This wasn't about business strategy, it was war. "Is that a threat?" I asked. He straightened his tie, smoothed his jacket, forcing himself to composure. "It's reality. You can make the transition smooth, or I can make it happen another way. But it will happen." He reached the door, paused, hand on the handle. "Think about it, Dad. Think about what's best for everyone." The door slammed behind him, rattling the window frames. I stood alone, staring at the scattered legal documents that had started this confrontation. My hands shook slightly as I picked up my car keys. The 20-minute drive through Cleveland's quiet suburbs gave me too much time to replay his words. "You're too old for this. I'm not asking permission anymore." By the time I pulled into my Shaker Heights driveway, the phrases had etched themselves into my mind like grooves on a record. I hung my coat with mechanical precision. The house felt unusually still. No TV chatter, no phone calls, just the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. I poured a whiskey, noticing my hands tremble slightly as I lifted the crystal decanter. Settling into my leather armchair, I was surrounded by decades of memories. Wedding photos, vacation snapshots, Cleveland's high school graduation smile, the same eager boy who once studied my work in the garage. When had everything changed? My eyes drifted to the old company photos on the bookshelf. There we were, 1995. I stood outside our tiny rented office, Cleveland at my side, his hands streaked with grease from moving equipment. He was just 22 then, fresh out of college, but eager to start from the ground up. Together, we worked late into the night, mapping out expansion strategies and celebrating even the smallest victories. I remembered those early sacrifices, missing family dinners because a client needed immediate attention, 80-hour workweeks to secure contracts that kept us afloat, sleepless nights over financial risks that could have cost everything I'd promised my family. From that cramped garage startup to a company of 300 employees, from $20,000 in annual revenue to $20 million. Every milestone had been earned through careful planning, relationship building, and steady growth. Not the aggressive tactics Cleveland preferred, but methodical progress that created lasting foundations. Maybe that was the issue. Perhaps I'd made it too easy for him. Cleveland had never known the uncertainty of those early years. He joined when the business was already established, paychecks guaranteed, growth inevitable. Confidence inherited, without the wisdom earned. Ambition without understanding the price of failure. But was I being fair? Was my grip on the company about guidance, or about clinging to an identity tied to work? Those questions circled my mind like vultures, picking at every choice I'd made over the last 5 years. I reached for my phone and dialed John Morrison, my mentor for 3 decades. He had seen every success and every misstep. If anyone could provide an objective perspective on this family crisis, it would be him. "Bill," John answered, his voice warm despite the late hour. "Everything all right?" "Cleveland and I had a confrontation today," I said. "He wants immediate control of the company." I summarized the office scene without admitting how deeply his words had shaken me. John paused. "Family business transitions are never simple. How do you feel about his readiness?" "Skilled, but impatient," I admitted. "He wants to transform everything overnight without seeing the risks. Maybe I'm just afraid of change." I swirled the whiskey in my glass, watching amber liquid catch the lamplight. "You've always been protective of your people and your principles," John said. "That's not a weakness. Cleveland's generation approaches business differently. The question is whether his methods can preserve what you've built while adapting to modern challenges." We spoke for another 20 minutes, exploring possibilities and reviewing examples from other family businesses. Some that transitioned successfully, others destroyed by impatience. By the end, I felt reassured in my concerns, yet no closer to a solution. After hanging up, I finished my whiskey and checked the time. 8:30. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. I needed rest, like a general bracing for a battle I'd hoped to avoid. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, intent on restoring order before the workday began. By 8:15, my desk was organized, the scattered papers from yesterday cleared. Morning sunlight streamed through the windows at a gentler angle, softer and more hopeful than the harsh glare that had highlighted Cleveland's anger. A soft knock interrupted my review of emails. Cleveland stepped in, carrying a silver tray with 2 coffee cups and a plate of pastries from the bakery near his house. His posture was subdued, apologetic, a stark contrast to yesterday's aggression. "Dad, I brought coffee," he said, placing the tray on my desk with careful hands, avoiding my eyes. "I want to apologize for yesterday. I was out of line." The aroma of fresh coffee filled the office. His movements were deliberate, rehearsed, measured. I studied him, searching for signs of sincerity or manipulation. "I spent last night thinking about what you said," he continued, finally meeting my gaze. You're right about patience and wisdom. I've been so focused on growth and opportunity, I forgot to appreciate what you've already built. He sat across from me, no longer looming, his body language respectful. I remember when I was 16, organizing your tools in the garage. You told me real success comes from understanding every component before trying to improve the machine. The memory stirred something deep: pride, love, years of shared effort. I accepted the coffee cup he offered, noting the perfect temperature, the rich flavor of my preferred roast, the very blend he'd discovered in college. You've thought this through, I said. More than I probably should have, he replied, calm and reflective. I want to earn your trust, not demand it. If you're willing to work on a gradual transition plan, I'll prove I can honor what Thompson Manufacturing represents. For the next hour, we discussed projects and responsibilities. Cleveland asked detailed questions about clients and production processes, showing genuine curiosity about areas he had previously dismissed. He nodded at my plans for sustainable growth over the next 2 to 3 years. I understand now that patience isn't stagnation, he said, reviewing his notes. Your approach builds lasting foundations, not temporary profits. The coffee was rich, warming, with hints of chocolate and caramel, a taste that brought memories of successful mornings long past. Cleveland agreed with every recommendation, recognizing the wisdom in gradual expansion and employee loyalty programs. His transformation seemed almost too perfect, but I wanted to believe it was real. There's a project with Morrison Industries that would be perfect for you to lead, I said, cautiously optimistic about the future of our relationship. It calls for the innovative thinking you've always championed, but within frameworks that preserve our core values. Cleveland's eyes brightened, genuine excitement, or so it seemed, flickering across his face. I'd be honored to take that on. Thank you for trusting me with something so important. As the meeting ended, Cleveland collected the empty coffee cups and the pastry plate, promising to earn his place in the company rather than simply inherit it. His humility appeared real, and for the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope that we might bridge the gap between his ambition and my experience. I watched him leave, carrying the silver tray with the same meticulous care he'd shown throughout our discussion. The lingering bitterness of my coffee faded, a small detail I dismissed as the difference between office brewing and a professional blend. For now, I allowed myself a quiet optimism about the future of our family business. By 5:45, I was preparing to leave, saving the quarterly projection spreadsheet and reaching for my coat behind the office door. Standing triggered the first wave, a sudden dizziness that sent me clutching the desk edge as papers slid across the hardwood floor. This wasn't ordinary fatigue. The room tilted unnaturally, like stepping off a carousel too quickly. I pressed my palm to the cool wood, waiting for balance to return. The air conditioning's hum seemed louder, clashing with a persistent ringing in my ears. Nausea followed, crawling slowly but insistently through my stomach. I loosened my tie, unbuttoned my collar, desperate for air despite the office's steady temperature. My hands shook as I reached for the water bottle by my monitor. What was happening to me? I tried standing again. My legs felt disconnected, unresponsive. The familiar view of Lake Erie wavered, distorted, and a metallic taste coated my tongue. This wasn't stress or overwork. Something was genuinely wrong. The intercom button took 2 tries before my trembling fingers could activate it. My mind was clear enough to give the taxi driver my address and settle the fare with steady hands. As we left Thompson Manufacturing's garage, I studied the downtown Cleveland skyline through the rear window. 30 years of building this company, and now my own body was betraying me, just as everything seemed to align with Cleveland's emerging maturity. "You all right back there, sir?" the driver asked through the rearview mirror. "Fine, thank you," I said, gripping the door handle as we merged onto the highway toward Shaker Heights. The late afternoon sunlight felt too bright, forcing me to close my eyes and lean back. Tomorrow will be better. It has to be. The driver helped me navigate the front steps, accepting an extra $20 for his patience. Inside, the familiar comfort of home offered immediate psychological relief, though my body continued to revolt. I prepared a light dinner, canned chicken soup and saltine crackers, a meal reserved for genuine illness. Sitting in my living room chair, I felt slightly improved. The nausea had eased to intermittent waves, and my hands had stopped their constant tremor. Early bedtime, I'd be better tomorrow. By 10:30, I was under the covers, expecting the restorative sleep that had always served me well. The red numbers of the digital clock glowed in the dark. At 11:45, I woke abruptly. The nausea had returned with a vengeance, accompanied by a pounding headache that felt like jackhammers in my skull. I stumbled to the bathroom for water and aspirin, bracing myself against the doorframe. By 1:20 I woke again. The headache had worsened, joined now by cold sweats. I sank to the bathroom floor, pressing my cheek to the cool tile, waiting for the next wave to pass. At 3:15 came the worst episode yet, dry heaving over the toilet, my head aching as if it might split apart. Every position was unbearable. Every movement sent new pain through me. I found myself on the edge of the bed, staring at the clock, counting the minutes between bouts. This wasn't normal. This wasn't age, stress, or overwork. I retrieved my home blood pressure monitor from the nightstand. The reading was elevated, not critical, but above my usual baseline. My temperature was slightly above normal, though not a fever. By 4:30, I was making mental notes for the doctor I'd avoided for 2 years: symptom onset, late afternoon, duration, ongoing, severity, moderate to severe. Possible causes: foodborne illness, viral infection, stress response, medication interaction, or an age-related episode. I avoided searching online, wary of the endless rabbit hole of self-diagnosis. Instead, I focused on what I could observe: the timeline, the precise sensations, the gradual shift from minor discomfort to full-blown malaise. Dawn arrived at 6, bringing slight relief. The headache had eased to something manageable, and my stomach no longer protested movement. I showered with deliberate care, letting the hot water rinse away the previous night's misery. Fresh clothes felt like armor against lingering illness. Breakfast was modest: toast and weak tea, bland sustenance to prepare for whatever challenges the day might hold. A doctor's visit would come if symptoms persisted. First, however, I needed to confront whatever urgent matters had piled up overnight. Driving to Thompson Manufacturing required heightened focus. I gripped the wheel firmly, taking turns cautiously. Cleveland's red sedan was already parked when I arrived, a detail either coincidental or unnervingly deliberate. By 9:30, I had cleared 3 urgent emails and signed 2 contracts, despite the lingering mental fog. I was operating at roughly 70% of my usual capacity, but at least I was functioning. Massaging my temples to fight the haze, I was interrupted by a soft knock. "Morning, Dad." Cleveland entered carrying an elaborate coffee setup, not just cups, but a thermal carafe, assorted pastries, and what appeared to be vitamin supplements, all arranged neatly on a silver tray. "You look pale. Everything all right?" The aroma of coffee hit my stomach like a jolt. My body recoiled with unexpected force, as if detecting a hidden threat. "Not today, son. Still feeling under the weather." Cleveland's expression flickered. Was it disappointment? Frustration? The emotion passed before I could analyze it, replaced by an almost theatrical display of concern. "What kind of symptoms?" he asked, leaning forward with professional curiosity. Nursing experience, he bragged, might give Hope insight. "General malaise. Headache, nausea, fatigue," I said briefly, unwilling to appear weak while the company needed leadership. "Probably just pushed myself too hard. Or maybe you need proper nutrition and family support," Cleveland countered, his pivot precise, rehearsed even. "Hope's making her famous healing pot roast tonight. Why don't you join us? Ethan's been asking about Grandpa." The mention of my grandson tugged sharply at my heart. I hadn't seen Ethan in 2 weeks, and the boy's excitement always lifted my spirits. Cleveland seemed to sense the emotional leverage in play. "She has recipes from her nursing days, foods that help recovery, not just fill your stomach," he added, sliding a card across my desk, 7 o'clock. Hope insists proper family meals cure more ailments than most medications. Logic noted the convenience, the timing, the invitation. But images of Ethan's face and Hope's warm presence nudged me toward acceptance. My isolation from last night had been miserable. Family might be exactly the remedy I needed. That sounds wonderful. Thank you for thinking of me, I said, slipping the card into my pocket. Tell Hope I appreciate her concern. Cleveland gathered the untouched coffee service with slightly hurried movements, but his smile remained perfectly measured. She'll be thrilled. Ethan's been working on a drawing project for you. I know you'll enjoy it. Despite my lingering discomfort, the prospect of family time brought real relief. At 7 o'clock sharp, after Cleveland left, I lingered at my desk, holding the invitation. The gesture was generous, but oddly convenient. My son had never shown much interest in my health before. Yet here he was, offering medical consultation and a home-cooked dinner within 24 hours of my sudden illness. Gratitude and suspicion sat uncomfortably together. The 30-minute drive through Cleveland's suburbs to Westlake cleared my head, despite the lingering fatigue. Cleveland's modern home sat on a quiet street, mature oaks lining the property, a reflection of the prosperity Thompson Manufacturing had provided. Before I could ring the bell, Ethan burst through the front door, his 10-year-old energy a stark contrast to my careful steps. Grandpa! He wrapped me in a fierce hug, the kind that made every sacrifice worthwhile. There's my favorite grandson, I said, ruffling his sandy hair and feeling genuine joy for the first time in 2 days. What have you been up to? The smell of roasting meat and herbs drifted from the kitchen, where Hope and Cleveland moved with synchronized efficiency. Hope stirring the stove, Cleveland arranging place settings with unusual precision. Come see my new game, Grandpa! Ethan pulled me toward the living room couch, his excitement contagious despite my lingering weakness and occasional nausea. He explained the rules with patience, clearly anticipating this moment. Dinner in 20 minutes, Cleveland called from the kitchen, his voice carrying a forced cheerfulness that bordered on strained. Hope's making her famous healing pot roast, especially for Dad's recovery. Ethan hesitated, glancing between the kitchen and his game controller, a flicker of unease crossing his expression. Everything okay, buddy? I asked, noticing how he fidgeted with the buttons without playing. Hope appeared in the doorway, hands wiped on a kitchen towel. How are you feeling, Bill? Any improvement since yesterday? Her concern seemed sincere, yet there was a calculating edge in her eyes, as if she were assessing my reactions rather than simply caring about my well-being. Feeling better, thank you. This time with family is exactly what I needed, I said with a smile, though Ethan's continued nervous fidgeting drew more of my attention than my own lingering discomfort. Grandpa, Ethan whispered suddenly, leaning close, I need to tell you something really important. He set down the controller, facing me directly. His young face carried a seriousness far beyond his 10 years. What is it, son? I leaned in, lowering my voice instinctively. Ethan glanced toward the kitchen, then back at me. I heard Mom and Dad talking about putting something in your food. They said it would make you sick, so you'd have to give them the company. His words tumbled out, urgent and rushed, as if he'd carried them inside for far too long. Time froze. Everything I thought I knew about family loyalty, about Cleveland's maturity, about Hope's nurturing care, shattered in the space of a heartbeat. What exactly did you hear? I asked, my voice tight. Mom was mixing something into the soup. Dad said it would make you weak, so you couldn't run the business anymore. Ethan's hand shook as he spoke. They're trying to hurt you, Grandpa. I don't want them to hurt you. I held his small hands, feeling them tremble against my own. You did the right thing telling me. Can you promise me something very important? He nodded solemnly. Don't tell your parents we talked. Let me handle this, okay? You're safe, and I'll make sure we're both protected. I squeezed his hands, then added, I need a moment in the bathroom. The guest bathroom offered the privacy I needed to absorb Ethan's revelation. I locked the door quietly, my hands no longer trembling from illness but from controlled fury. My own son, my flesh and blood, plotting to kill me for the company I built to secure his future. I checked my cell signal before dialing 911. Every household sound from the kitchen seemed unnervingly loud, the hum of the stove, cabinets opening and closing, ordinary noises now sinister. 911, what's your emergency? My son, he's trying to poison me, I said, disbelief lacing my voice, yet there was no room for doubt after Ethan's confession. I'm at his house, 1247 Oak Street, Westlake. Sir, are you in immediate danger? They're preparing dinner. My grandson overheard them talking about putting something in my food. I kept my voice low, listening for approaching footsteps. They'd been planning this for 2 days. I need officers here immediately. We're dispatching units to your location. Can you avoid eating anything they offer you? Yes, but please hurry. There's a child here, my 10-year-old grandson. He's the one who warned me. The dispatcher's calm, professional questions helped me focus. Exact address, number of people in the house, potential weapons. Units are en route. Estimated arrival, 15 minutes. Remain calm and avoid confrontation. Do not let them know you've called police. I flushed the toilet and ran water in the sink, maintaining the illusion of normality while my mind raced through the implications. Cleveland's ruthless thirst for control, Hope's medical knowledge, the conveniently timed illness following yesterday's morning coffee ritual. Every piece now formed a terrifying puzzle. I checked the mirror, forcing my expression neutral. In 15 minutes, my family might be destroyed, but Ethan would be safe. That had to suffice. I opened the door and stepped into the hallway just as Cleveland called from the dining room. Dad, come on in. Hope has everything ready, and it smells amazing. The man summoning me to dinner was the same one who had once taught me business strategy, hugged me at his wedding, cried when Ethan was born, and now calculated how to kill his own father. I walked toward the dining room steadily, preparing for the performance of a lifetime. Cleveland had transformed the room into a lavish dinner stage, complete with cloth napkins, fine china, and steaming serving bowls arranged around a floral centerpiece. The celebratory air made my stomach churn, and not from lingering illness. The guest of honor sits at the head of the table, Cleveland announced with theatrical flourish, guiding me to the chair facing the kitchen. Hope carefully ladled soup into my bowl, her movements deliberate and precise, adding what seemed to be extra herbs from a small container beside the stove. I've added some special healing spices just for you, she said, her nursing experience lending weight to her words. These herbs are excellent for digestion and general weakness. Ethan took his seat across from me, our eyes meeting briefly before he looked down at his own bowl. The fear in his young face was tightly restrained, and I realized he was watching his parents' every action with the same horrified fascination I felt. To family healing and fresh beginnings, Cleveland said, raising his glass of water in a toast. He waited for everyone to follow. May this meal restore Dad's strength and bring us closer together. The irony pressed down on me like a weight. I lifted my glass but didn't drink, noting how Cleveland's eyes tracked my every movement. Hope set the bowl in front of me, the rising steam carrying a subtle undertone I couldn't place, something bitter beneath the familiar aroma of beef and vegetables. I'm not very hungry tonight, I said politely, pushing the bowl slightly away. You need nourishment to recover properly, Cleveland said, his concern sharp at first but slowly acquiring an edge. Hope stepped closer, her voice gentle but insistent. I prepared this for your condition. The soup has nutrients your body desperately needs. Without proper nutrition, your immune system can't fight whatever's been making you sick. I held firm in my refusal, but Cleveland's patience was thinning. His jaw clenched as I declined again, and I saw him exchange a worried glance with Hope. Their carefully laid plan was unraveling because I wasn't cooperating. Dad, you need to eat something, Cleveland pressed, his tone carrying the same authority he'd used in the office confrontation. You've been sick for 2 days. This soup will help. I'm not hungry, I replied, more firmly than I had intended. Both Cleveland and Hope stiffened at my resistance. The sudden sound of car doors slamming outside cut through the tense standoff. Heavy footsteps crossed the front walkway, followed by a commanding knock that froze everyone at the table. Police. Open the door. Cleveland's face went pale. Who called the police? He demanded, his eyes darting between Hope and me as comprehension dawned. Hope dropped her ladle, the clatter echoing through the suddenly silent house. Ethan slipped from his chair, moving closer to me, seeking protection from the chaos about to unfold. The knocking became more insistent. This is the Westlake Police Department. We need to speak with the residents immediately. Cleveland Thompson, open the door at once. The authoritative voice left no room for negotiation. Cleveland stumbled toward the front door, his face drained of color. Hope's serving spoon clattered to the floor once more. 3 officers entered with precise efficiency, their badges gleaming under the warm glow of the chandelier. The lead detective surveyed the dining room like a professional, taking in the formal table setting, the steaming bowls, and our frozen tableau of guilty parties and the protected victim. Sir, we received a report of attempted poisoning at this address. Detective Martinez addressed me directly while his colleagues positioned themselves strategically around the room. Are you William Thompson? I am, I replied, relief washing over me as I stood slowly, keeping a protective hand on Ethan's shoulder. Thank you for coming so quickly. Cleveland's protests erupted immediately. This is ridiculous. What poisoning? We're having a family dinner. His voice cracked with desperation as the detective photographed the table before anyone could disturb potential evidence. Everyone, step away from the table, please, Detective Martinez instructed. His partner began collecting samples from each bowl, paying close attention to mine. We'll need to test these immediately. Hope stood frozen by the stove, horror etched across her face as a crime scene technician opened her herb container and documented its contents with methodical precision. I don't understand, she whispered, though the trembling in her hands betrayed her fear. Ma'am, you have the right to remain silent, Detective Martinez said, approaching Cleveland with handcuffs in hand. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. Dad? Cleveland's gaze locked onto mine across the room as the handcuffs clicked shut. How could you do this to your own family? The irony was staggering. I could ask you the same question, son. Hope was taken into custody moments later, her nursing background making her equally accountable in the poisoning scheme. Outside, neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, drawn by the flashing lights and police cars that transformed our quiet suburban street into a scene of tension and fear. Ethan pressed closer to me as his parents were escorted past toward the front door. Cleveland paused, looking back at me with a mixture of shock and pleading. Forgive me, Dad. I never intended for it to go this far. You meant to kill me, Cleveland. That's exactly how far you plan to go. Detectives assured me that Ethan could stay in my care pending formal arrangements. Within the hour, we were driving away from the house that had become a symbol of betrayal. My grandson fell asleep in the passenger seat before we even reached the highway, exhausted by the emotional upheaval that had shattered his world. 20 minutes later, I carried him into my Shaker Heights home, tucking him into the guest bedroom that would now serve as his permanent room. The court date card in my jacket pocket marked the next chapter in our pursuit of justice. 8 days later, the Cuyahoga County Courthouse loomed like a temple of justice. Ethan and I climbed the stone steps toward the third-floor courtroom, where Cleveland and Hope would face the consequences of their actions. My grandson's small hand gripped mine tightly, his bravery remarkable for a child so young. All rise for the Honorable Judge Patricia Williams. The bailiff's voice rang through the formal courtroom. Families, attorneys, and court personnel rose in unison. Across the aisle, Cleveland and Hope sat with their defense counsel, looking diminished in orange jumpsuits, weighed down by the evidence arrayed against them. The state of Ohio versus Cleveland Thompson and Hope Thompson, attempted murder in the first degree. Judge Williams reviewed the charges with measured authority before nodding to the prosecutor. Counselor, you may present your opening statement. The prosecution laid out the evidence methodically, lab reports confirming toxins in the soup, medical testimony linking my symptoms to the poisoning, and physical evidence from Cleveland's kitchen that painted an unmistakable picture of premeditated intent. Mr. Thompson, please state your relationship to the defendants. Cleveland is my son. Hope is my daughter-in-law. Saying it in court felt surreal, as if I were describing strangers rather than family members who had shared decades of birthdays and dinners. Tell the court what occurred on the evening of June 12th. I recounted the dinner invitation, Ethan's warning, and the insistent pressure to eat food I now knew had been poisoned. My own son had tried to kill me to seize control of my company. Without my grandson's courage, I would not be alive. The defense attorney's cross-examination faltered against the overwhelming evidence. Mr. Thompson, isn't it possible you misunderstood a child's imagination? 10-year-olds can invent conversations about food and medicine. Ethan testified via closed-circuit television, protected from courtroom stress. With a victim advocate beside him, he spoke clearly and truthfully. I saw Mom mixing something special for Grandpa. Dad said it would make him too weak to run the company anymore. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Judge Williams delivered the sentence with moral weight. Family relationships are built on trust, love, and protection. You violated those sacred bonds for financial gain. I sentence each defendant to 8 years in state prison. Cleveland's last words echoed through the courtroom. Dad, forgive me. I lost my way entirely. Watching them escorted away brought a sense of justice, but no satisfaction in seeing my son disappear behind bars. 4 days after the trial, I sat in my Thompson manufacturing office, reviewing legal documents with a perspective reshaped by betrayal. The photos of company milestones now felt bittersweet. Success meant little without trustworthy people to share it with. My estate attorney spread new paperwork across the mahogany desk once cluttered with Cleveland's demands for immediate control. The revisions ensured that Ethan would inherit the company at 25, with professional management until then. Cleveland's name was removed from all corporate documents. Educational funds were established for Ethan's business training, but no pressure to join the company unless he chose to. At 4 p.m., I drove to Edgewater Park overlooking Lake Erie, where Ethan and I had developed our evening routine of watching sunsets and talking about his adjustment to life with his grandfather. The same view from my office now offered a quiet backdrop for healing conversations. Grandpa, do you think Mom and Dad still love me? His innocent question carried the weight of a child grappling with adult betrayal. They love you very much. They made terrible choices about money and power, but their love for you was never in question. I kept my arm around his shoulders as we watched boats drift across the water. Sometimes people forget what truly matters. We discussed his new school, weekend activities, and the realization that living with me wasn't temporary. Will I run the company someday? Only if you want to. You'll have many choices, and I'll support whatever makes you happy. The sunset cast a golden glow as we sat together on our favorite bench. The most important lesson I can teach you, I said, is that real wealth comes from relationships built on trust. Hand in hand, walking back to the car, I felt lighter than I had in years. Justice had been served. Family bonds had been tested, and where it mattered, strengthened. The future stretched ahead, filled with possibilities I had never imagined. Ethan's laughter at my suggestion of ice cream for dinner reminded me that some traditions were worth keeping, while others could be created anew. Healing had begun, and a new family legacy was waiting to be built together. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.